Just trying to think in my head. Just welcome to the Route to Networking podcast, brought to you by Hamilton Barnes. Today, I'm joined by my guest, Roger Perkin. How are you, sir? How's things?
Good afternoon. Yeah, fine, thanks.
Excellent. Very good. Very good. You look nice and cold.
Yeah, I was chatting earlier. The little heater in my office is packed up, so I'm awaiting another one. We're okay.
The fun and games. No, thanks for taking the time. I know it's taken us a couple of weeks to get booked in, but really excited to get you on the podcast. And for those of our listeners that don't know, so Roger, and I'm sure he'll cover this in a lot more depth, works at Computacenter, so one of the largest, kind of SIs within Europe, pretty much, or even the world. Really, really large business, and network automation is Roger's bag. He does quite a lot extracurricular activities as well, which I enjoy staying on top of. Has a website and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
Perfect. So this is always an interesting one for me, because when people come on the podcast, I do research into them. Not loads and loads, but you deal with people kind of day to day, and you never actually take the time to have a look at their proper background and kind of where they come from and that kind of stuff. So obviously, I noticed you went to university. So you went to, was it Plymouth from memory?
Yeah, that's correct. A long time ago. So I studied electronics and ended up specializing in radar repair, which was I did marine electronics with a view to going. Well, the jobs were to go to sea as a radar sort of specialist, but that never happened. I ended up going to work for GCHQ. So.
Oh, really? I wondered where that big gap in your LinkedIn went, but that makes more sense now.
Yeah, so I started off at GCHQ in the world of radio, and then during my time there, towards the end, I started to get into IT. So I wanted to look about how they did all the network and all the computer side of things, and then stepped out of GCHQ and into my first IT job, which was just server support. And then from there, it just evolved server support, desktop support, server support, and then into networking and to where I am today. So
you loved it so much.
Basically. Many different partners and jobs, and always sort of going up the ladder and getting onto bigger and bigger things. And so 20 years later, I'm here. So.
Crazy. Yeah, it's funny because I looked at your LinkedIn and I saw that there was a gap kind of from leaving university and then starting work. I think I can't remember what employer was the first one you list on your LinkedIn. And I thought, that's interesting. But yeah, that makes a bit more sense now. Do you want to explain to some of our listeners that aren't British or aren't in the loop what GCHQ is, without getting in trouble, of course?
So it's the government communication headquarters, and they are, I can't say what I was doing, but I was involved in sort of radio communications around the world, and it's not an unknown fact that they do a lot of code decryption and were sort of very instrumental in the World War, sort of the winning of the World Wars back in the day, when the GCHQ was the people that sort of decrypted some of the Germans' code with the Enigma machine, which is where most people know it from. But so it was an interesting time, but IT was sort of pulling on me, and I sort of stepped out and have never looked back. So.
And why did you start off in radar? What is it that intrigued you about that as well?
That was just I think it was I wasn't exactly sure, to be honest, what I was going to do when I left school and went to a college careers evening, and the college was there selling the electronics course, and at the end of the electronics engineering course there was another module that you could go into radar and go and travel the world. And the idea was to travel the world and be on board a ship and be responsible for all the electronics and radar, but the job never happened, and the only job that was available at the time was the cross-channel ferry to France. And then at the end of it, I was, GCHQ came along and they said, we want guys like you, and then they trained me into what they were doing. So it was a good starting point. So
Yeah, nice, fantastic. And what is it that interests? Because obviously you mentioned you went into servers and then into networking. What is it that interested you about networking specifically?
Yeah, so I think the original thing is, everyone starts with a computer, and then most people that are into IT take that computer apart and fix it and put a new disk in. And once Windows have crashed and you realize how to fix it, you think, I could do this. And I got my first little job actually with it was a sort of private sort of job with a small office where I live locally. They had like 6 computers, and they were connected together on a little sort of local network with a server. And that was my sort of first insight into actual servers and file sharing and networking. And although the server stuff was interesting, what intrigued me was the actual, connecting the devices together. So
Amazing. Yeah. And now you just do that, but on a far larger scale. So
yeah. So it's still there. And I wish, looking back now, I forgot all the server and desktop stuff and just went straight to the networking, because it's always assumed that that's the path that you should take. You should start on desktop support and then do server support and then go into networking. But I think I could probably have chopped 5 years off my career and just gone straight to networking, and that would have been probably a better path. But we do what we do. I did the whole MCSE thing, and yeah, it's good to know, but hasn't really helped me where I am today.
Yeah, no, and I think more and more universities now are doing more and more network specific degrees, which is amazing, because I think even if I think back to years ago, it was always computer science, or that was kind of the go-to. But then now there's probably in the UK 17 universities or 18 now that do computer networks and security, and that then means people leave uni and go, oh, I want to be a network engineer, I don't want to do desktop or whatever, which is great. Yeah. So no, very good. What is one thing you wish you knew before you got into your career? Young Roger.
Young Roger. Yeah, I wish I knew what I would be doing in 10 years time. So, and then I could probably have started that 10 years before. So I think I've sort of circled around the place. So if I knew that, the networking was the way to go, and I wish I'd started learning Python a lot sooner. And, so it's sort of a long, windy path to get to a point where I am now. So
it's going to be interesting where it goes in the next 5 to 10 years as well, isn't it? Like, it's just technology's moving so quickly at the moment that I just think it's going to go absolutely sky high.
Yeah, well, that's the sort of problem, I think, with the whole automation thing, is that there's so much going on, that the problem is to trying to get focus in a direction. So
yeah, exactly. Perfect. So obviously you did your degree in electrical and electronics engineering. Do you feel it's helped you in networking at all, or would you recommend the path to somebody else, or how do you feel?
It was I think it was one of those things I've studied that and learnt that, but I haven't used the knowledge that I've got. Maybe the geek brain was used, but yeah, if I'd have done computer science at the time, it might have probably helped me in a better position than I am now. So yeah, looking back, maybe a computer science degree might have been different, but then I would have taken a different path. So yeah, it's not a bad thing, but I don't use the electronics in what I'm doing at the moment. So
how do you feel about university full stop? Because obviously you went to university and the room's divided, isn't it? Some people go, no, try and get started earlier, or some people go, no, it's important to get into that kind of learning mindset. How do you feel?
It's interesting, because I've got a daughter now who's 16. She's sort of having these discussions, and personally I wouldn't do university. I think it seems to be 4 years to do something that is, in my opinion, sort of pausing something that you could have started 4 years before. So
yeah,
if I'd have done computer science, yes, I'd have learned a lot of stuff, but I'd have learned a very broad range of things. Whereas going into a job straight away, out of college, would have probably, I think, accelerated you more, and you get earning quicker. And so yeah, I'm on the not too sure about university and what benefit it does give for some careers. Obviously, if you're going to be a lawyer or a doctor and you need those qualifications, it's essential part. But for this sort of field, and to be honest, I've applied for jobs throughout my life that have always said they wanted a degree, and I don't think it would have mattered either way if you didn't have it. So
Yeah,
it's the experience that people want. So.
it's interesting, yeah, because I never went to university because basically I know I'd enjoy the social side too much and not so much the studying side. So I thought, well, that's a massive waste of money. And I think out of all of our customers that look for people across networking and security and that kind of stuff, the only ones that are still pretty hung up on degrees are Silicon Valley. But I think it's because obviously their perception of a university degree in the US, is obviously they don't have polytechnics and the structure's different and that kind of stuff. I'd say Brits or even Europeans and that kind of stuff are coming around to that way of thinking. And if you pick somebody up, like I'm working with one chap at the moment, and he's 23 years old and he's got 5 years experience. He's done his CCMP and he's 23. And you're like, and he's worked at a managed service provider where he gets thrown loads of different stuff all the time. And that's almost, if you get somebody leaving university when they're 22 or 22, 23, and they've got a university degree, they've got a lot of theoretical knowledge. But even trying to remember some of that theoretical knowledge 3 years, if you covered it in your first 6 months, and then having to try and go to an interview and then talk about spanning tree or whatever in your interview, all of a sudden that's a long time to remember something if you're not using it.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of things in the automation world where they say, oh, we've got a graduate in and he's just spent the last 2 weeks doing something and he's written all this code. And obviously if they've done that and specialized in some kind of automation. So there's some great use cases for it, where they've dug in and a lot of time I've seen, the graduate's done this. And it's like, oh my goodness, that would have taken me months to do. And, they've just done it and they're 22 and so yeah.
Nice. No, very good. So obviously you're now at Computer Centre. Congratulations. How long have you been there now? How many months?
It's coming up for a year now. So I actually changed jobs in lockdown, which was another new sort of concept. Yeah, the whole driving somewhere and getting your suit on and doing the interviews, and it was all remote interviews. And one laptop I sent back, and the next laptop arrived, and I sort of carried on doing what I was doing without leaving the house. So that was a new one for me as well. So
crazy time, isn't it? Have you been to a customer's visit yet, or have you met anybody yet, or like customer wise, or is it still all over video? What are you finding?
Yeah, so I have done a few engagements in London. So when it was full lockdown, we had obviously a lot of customers who had the opportunity to get into the office and do some work where there weren't any people in. So that was there was a few of those jobs going on. And that was quite nice. I was on the train. One day I was the only car in the car park at the train station. And I think there was 4 people on the train. There were 10 carriages, drove up, stayed in great hotels, because when you were allowed to travel for business, the hotels were saying you could come and stay for business. And they had like 10 people staying in this great big hotel and all the prices had dropped. So, yeah, it was
perfect.
It was interesting. And then I prefer, going to London and working in an empty office because, I like the technology, but when you put people into it, then it's an issue. But yeah, it was good to do stuff while there weren't people in, and then as they've come back, they've gradually be able to test what we've done, and it's worked out. But the last sort of probably 5 months I've been at home. So
amazing. And the technology you've been working with, obviously since you've been at Computer Centre, is there anything that's particularly caught your eye or you've been really impressed with?
So I mean, obviously I'm into automation, so I'm doing a lot. So Ansible and Python are the 2 things I'm working more with. Ansible gets a bad rap because it's always seen as everyone should be doing Python and not Ansible, but we do a lot with Ansible. It's a really good tool, very flexible, very solid, and has evolved a lot in the network world in the last few years. Lots of big corporates are using Ansible, and if you read into it, I think a lot of your listeners will be saying like, oh yeah, but Ansible's slow and you must use Python. But it depends on what you're trying to do. So if you've got a task that just needs to run and it just needs to work, Ansible's a great tool. And there's also lots of testing tools, I think, which are coming out now, which I'm getting I haven't got enough time to look into really, but tools like Batfish and PyATS and these sort of Python tools that are designed just to test networks, which, is amazing. Batfish is really handy. You can just take offline configs of all your network, push a change into it, and ask the tool, what would that change do to my network? And Batfish comes back and say, well, if you did that, you're going to block this, or you're going to take this link down. And that's where the benefit of automation is. Because a lot of people always consider automation to be the configuration side of things. Let's configure stuff really quickly and get it out. But once that's done, it's just the running of that network and the operational status. And if you can get some automated testing in place and running, that makes your life so much easier. When things start to scale and you've got thousands and thousands of firewall rules, all being automated, if you've got a tool that can just come back to you and say, if you make this change, you're going to stop this, and this, it's good. And performance and all these things. We've got global networks that have got just automation running against it day and night, just monitoring and just checking things, and compliance, all these things which you would never have enough time in your life to do, but you can set a script away to do it, and it will just sit there day and night and come back and tell you in the morning, oh, just to let you know, someone's changed this on another site, and they've made this and we've pushed it back, or whatever. So I think the testing side is where it's going to be for me.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? We had Rick Donato on a few weeks ago on the podcast. I'm sure you know Rick. He's obviously a very big advocate of Batfish, isn't he? And good stuff around Batfish. It sounds really cool. Very cool.
Yeah, I know Rick. We sort of chat quite regularly and on what he's doing, and he's doing some good stuff. So. But he's got time to do his training, which is some great. He did a Batfish boot camp, which was a while back, which is it's I think it was written by Microsoft, I think, a while back. But it's one of all these tools that never, you don't see them advertised as the great thing, but in the right worlds, they are very powerful.
Who thinks up these names, though? Names. More importantly, they're great names, but it's just it's completely off the wall, which I actually quite like.
Yeah, so all these developers, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Too much freedom. Is there anything happening in network automation that you find concerning, or that you think is going to create issues down the line, or anything like that?
Well, for me, what's concerning is the amount of tools and new tools that are just daily being released and coming on board. And for me, what I've seen is there's lots of tools coming out now that are reporting no coding required.
Yeah.
So obviously there's always going to be the hardcore Ansible, Python sort of tools that do the stuff, but there's a lot of platforms that are coming out now that are claiming to remove the code, and you just tell the system what you want it to do. And to me, that's a bit concerning. The Cisco have always tried to make networking really easy and making things give you a nice dashboard and just push and click. But we all know that to actually do something properly, you're going to need some people under the hood sort of fixing things that are going on. So it's just steering clear of. I haven't tested every one of these. I'm not going to name any tools that are out there, but there are quite a few coming along that are trying to get rid of all this code. But I think automation, you are going to have to get under the hood, know what's going on. And the other one is the people that are doing automation. For me, I've come into networking and I've got the networking experience, and then I'm adding the automation on the top. So there's a whole team of people now that are the developer side of it that are coming with no network experience, and then they're saying, oh, don't worry about that, we can teach you the networking. But it's what's missing in the world of automation is that glue between the people. So having someone that understands both sides of it and then can to bring the right people together. So if you've got someone that knows how the network works but doesn't know how to do the code, and you've got some people that know how to do the code, you can say, right, I want you to do code to do this, and this is what the network bit does, and it all comes together. But I don't think those single people, there's not too many of them about that can bring everything together. So and that's the challenge.
What would you say? Obviously, just going to that point as well. Obviously, you have your coders, you have your network people as well. What for you has been a steeper learning curve? Because obviously your CCIE which is the pinnacle of networking. You're obviously doing a lot in automation now. How do you find the kind of learning curves for those two different things?
Yeah, well, my CCIE was a big learning curve. I'm not embarrassed to say that it took me 5 attempts to get that one over quite a few years. And anyone that does know me and has followed my website has, you know, sort of followed my journey on that one. And it's that was a thing that I definitely wanted to get, you know, in my career.
Yeah.
That was the one. You know, if you're doing networking, you've got to be a CCIE. And I'm so glad I did, because that stayed with me now for the rest of my life, and I can always put that number down. But learning all the other things, I think there's just so many of them. So I start learning some Python, I start doing some Ansible, and then Terraform comes along and you start learning a bit of that. And I don't think there's enough time in the day to learn them all. So again, for me in my position, I'm better off having an appreciation of what each tool does, and then finding the Terraform expert who can then go off for a few months and do it, because I'm never going to be a Terraform, Python, Ansible, AWX, you know, all the cloud things expert in everything. But if you've got an appreciation, you know, a couple of weeks of working with something, you can know how it works, know what it can do, know its capabilities, know what it can't do, and then easily find someone who is an expert in that area to do that bit for you. So
amazing. What did it feel like? Obviously, after 5 goes as well, your CCIE, how did it feel to pass? You must have been elated.
Yes, I was. That was so I mean, the first go was a waste of time. I shouldn't have done it. I went there thinking I'll just go and see what it's like. Then I did a couple more goes, and in the middle of it, an employer paid for 1, then I paid for 2. Then I changed jobs, and my employer at the time, who was that? Dimension Data. They were really good to me, and they said, look, we'll give you 2 more shots at it. So they paid for 2 more. Failed the 4th one, and then the 5th one, I just went straight back into it and said, no, I've got to do it. But that's the key to the CCIE, is having the ability to, if you're going to fail it, is to be able to go straight back and do it again in 30 days. Because I think, you know, a lot of people do fund it and then they've failed it once, and then for me, I had a sort of fallow period where, you know, a year went by where I hadn't sort of dug into it. But it was my wife and daughter suffered a lot, so didn't see me for a while. We missed out on things, but I don't regret it. You know, it's certainly something but I wouldn't today probably do the CCIE. I would then probably put more time and effort into all the other things. So, you know, I think now CCIE is a great qualification. But I think in this day and age now, what's great for, you know, network folks, IT folks, is to have some sort of public presence of what you're doing, you know, and, you know, CVs are even becoming a thing of the past, and people are now looking at your GitHub repository and see what code you've done and see what projects you've been working on. And it's a good stamp, and we still, you know, to this day, they get requests for resources. They want CCIE resources, you know, so that's what, because it's seen as you've got a certain level of knowledge. And so it is still requested today, and I'm sure, you know, yourself still look for CCIEs.
I'd say this, I think it's one of those things, isn't it? I think a lot of the people, I think it's different for yourself, because obviously you're looking at a different space, but I get a lot of the people that come to me, they go, oh, there's no point in doing the CCIE, you know, you're better off doing this and this. Usually I've never done the CCIE, and whenever I speak to anybody that's done it, nobody ever regrets doing it. And I think it's not even necessarily passing the exam. Don't get me wrong. I think you get a lot of enjoyment from that, and you're like, wow, like top of the mountain type stuff. But I think it's those failed attempts that makes you better. Like the failing, getting back up, Because you find sometimes, chap last year, won't mention his name, but I placed him out of university, and he had a crack at the CCIE lab, 23, 24 years old, and he passed it.
Wow.
Right. And he said, because his employer had a certain amount of people they were putting through it, he'd done CCNP at uni, and he thought, you know what, I'm going to have a year run up it. I'm just going to have a crack at it, but I probably won't pass it. And he passed it. And he was like, oh, but I'm not really a CCIE, even though I passed it, because part of it is getting knocked, like you did, get knocked down, get back up, get knocked down, get back up, build the experience, 10
Yeah.
years experience, all that kind of stuff. So he's like, now it worries me a little bit because I'm a CCIE route switch, and he's like, I don't know, I don't really feel like a CCIE, not really, you know. But I think part of it is those battle scars and kind of getting those knockbacks. And yeah, you're right. A lot of customers will come to us and say, yeah, we need somebody CCIE certified or whatever. But usually I just push back on them. And I'll say, because there's a lot of very good CCNPs out there. Just haven't done it, you know, and you know the ones. The only time that I find that's a hard and fast requirement is if they've agreed a particular project for a customer where there will be a CCIE or Cisco partnership. We need a certain amount of people for gold partnership that need to have X, Y, and Z specializations, and we need X amount of badges type thing so we can get our discounts. You know, that's what we find.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest thing that I take from it was just labbing everything to every single degree. You know, so I did loads of BGP labs and OSPF labs, and I knew it back to front. Yeah, because I'd spent 16 hours that weekend doing 2 massive, great, you know, labs on it. And then when you're in a customer meeting on the Monday and someone is arguing with you about how BGP works, I could literally, with confidence, stand up in the board and say, no, just to let you know, this is how BGP works, and this and this and this. And I knew, because I just spent 8 hours doing it the day before in the lab and tested every single thing, because there's always going to be people that say, oh no, that's not how it works. And most people will just back down and just accept it. But it's having that confidence that that you're right, because you have done all the labs and you know how it works. And that sort of I mean, for a good while after the lab, after I passed it, that gave me some great confidence to just have those discussions. But when I did that, none of this crazy stuff was about. It was networking, and you could talk it. And then since then, it's just SD-WAN, and everything's just exploded in cloud, and so the topics just go a lot further. But yeah, it starts at the CCIE. Once you've done it, you realize that then there is so much more to do, and you encounter people that have been doing AWS for 5 years, and they're gurus in that expert. They're not a CCIE, but they can do amazing stuff in cloud. And so I think it's not the CCIE as such, it's just putting the time in on the technology. And if you can get other people to put the time in on the technology, they know it, and who those guys are. When you work with them, the guy that's, like you said, who's a really good CCNP, has got no interest in passing the lab. He said, I don't want to give up a year of my life to do that, but he's a really good engineer. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, I think it's just an interesting time for technology, full stop, isn't it? Because it's been quite steady state for a number of years, and obviously there wasn't SD-WAN, software defined access, software defined WAN. You've got automation, you've got cloud, you've got all these things that all of a sudden in the last few years have just gone bang. So yeah, quite an interesting time. And do you think you'd do the CCIE DevNet? Throw it out there.
Yes, I've done so I did the CCNA DevNet last year, so I was in the class of 2020, and I would say that was my favorite Cisco exam, apart from the lab, out of all the other smaller ones, because it was just really practical, and there was lots of stuff in there. And how does this work? How does this Python script work? How does this data model work? And so that was good. I do have the CCNP stuff on my sort of targets for next year to get done, but I don't know if the CCIE DevNet is just another hurdle too big to take. And I think if I was doing it today, definitely I would do the CCIE, because I haven't found out the answer yet, is if you do a CCIE DevNet, whether you get so I'll be like the CCDE and the other stuff, whether you get a different number, or whether you're still just your same CCIE number. Because if you pass another CCIE in like security, you keep the same number. So whether it's going to be like the CCDE where you had the different number for that, I haven't found that out, but I don't think I'll be digging into that next year, because
it's not something you need to know, Roger, basically, because you're not going to hear it. So Well, yeah, I see them keeping it as the same as the CCIE number because it's IE, and then obviously CCDE is always the year, backed up by the number of person you were that year to pass it. And I think they might keep that separate, just because it's not an IE. But yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know anybody that's really going for CCIE DevNet yet. Not really. I think whenever you go, because obviously you go Cisco Live and that kind of stuff, the DevNet area has been getting bigger and bigger every year. Initially, it was basically a chair, basically in the corner, hidden, and then over time it's just gone boom, 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 and then now it's a whole floor pretty much.
I think
it bigger.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have got to take sort of confidence in the fact that Cisco are embracing it so much to actually do these tracks and to have the CCIE at the end of it. It just shows their commitment to this world and that it's here to stay, and it is something that you just do need to get your head around.
Yeah, exciting, very good. Right, if you had an infinite budget, IT, and you could purchase one thing for a business, what would it be?
A massive lab. So
really,
yeah. So most of the time when we're doing something, it's always testing it is the problem.
Yeah.
And testing it against the live environment. So, and I know there's a load of simulators around. There's always, all your virals and GNS3 and how you can simulate smaller things. But a lot of companies have lots sort of wider ranging networks now. There's cloud and there's private cloud and public cloud and all these other bits. So I think if you had a chunk of money and you want to really do this, having a carbon copy of your network just spun up in another data center somewhere that you can just destroy and put stuff against all the time. Because the whole problem, I've discovered over the years was everyone's afraid to make a change because they're, don't touch that switch. It's been running for 15 years, don't reboot it. It'll never start. Yeah. Whereas the model that we need to be working towards now is literally we could go into that data center and burn the thing down, and then we could rebuild another one just with this code and have it back up and running in, however long if the kit was there. So if you had the opportunity to have an exact copy of your network somewhere else that you could delete and then rebuild from code, and you had the confidence that you could do that, within an hour, it gives you fantastic confidence to then just push changes in the daytime on your live network.
Yeah.
So, we need to get away from the weekend nighttime changes, because with automation, you can make stuff completely predictable and that it's going to work. And the changes should just be happening through the day without a problem.
It makes me feel, I'm literally scared listening to you talk about it, but it's only because you hear it all the time, like, oh, this P1, this outage or whatever. But you're right. If it's predictable, it's going to go through, then you should be able to do it. I know that Cisco have got a department, or used to have a department. It was bigger, but it's not as big as it used to be, which was SVS, so Solutions Validation Services. And that was kind of an area within Cisco where if a customer wanted to use their lab environment, they would do exactly. It's about building confidence to be able to say, yeah, this is going to work. But I get a feeling, just from what I've heard, that department's downsized over the last 10 years. It's not like it's getting bigger. You think it'd get bigger rather than smaller.
It's obviously people always, there's a load of virtual stuff that you can do to simulate some changes. Yeah, it's just those bits where people go, oh, we can't touch that thing, or we can't touch that thing. And I know, just having a lab, doing stuff, it's just that confidence that that you can wipe it and start it again, then it comes back. So yeah, that's what I would do.
Nice, very good. What do you think is going to, in the last 10 years, is going to completely revolutionize networking?
So it's already happening in the whole automation world, but what's going to revolutionize it is, I think scarily, is sort of the artificial intelligence kind of stuff, is having the network to a point where it is going to fix itself, and it is learning, and it can understand what's happening, and fully understanding sort of intent driven networking.
Yeah.
So just being able to say, we want this to talk to that, push the button, and then all the code goes off and does it. And that's where the whole automation world is, always trying to get to different hardware vendors, but with the same outcome across all the platforms. So I think, at some point it's going to come together, but at the moment it just feels like there's loads of stuff all just happening and trying to come together into a single platform. But there's never going to be a standard on this thing. That's the other thing is, within the automation world, no one's defined. Obviously there's the sort of development standards, like the YAML and the coding standards, but everything is just doing its own thing. But if we can have a vision where, that's the ultimate, this talks to that, push the button, and under the hood, that's where all the clever stuff happens, which you don't have to worry about. So it's a common, the ideal position is a common API across all devices, which so if everyone can talk to everyone with the same API, then we're great. But it's just overcoming those differences between the vendors. And so I think if all the vendors could agree on a standard API, between all of them, and everything talk together, then life would be a lot easier.
Yeah. Does the AI stuff worry you, or are you fine about it? Because I've spoken to a number of people. Some people people go one way or the other with it, really.
Yeah, obviously there's if you watch Silicon Valley, there's some great bits in there about the AI and how they develop this whole system, which basically just discovers the encryption algorithm and worked out how to break it itself. And it was a fantastic episode. But the just letting something go which you don't fully understand what it's going to do, and they let this thing go, and it just took a life of its own and managed to break this industry encryption standard in seconds. But yeah, it obviously it could be scary, but I think in the world of networking it's not going to be that scary. So
yeah, we'll be all right. But if anything, it'll do our work for us. That'd be good. No, very good. And what advice would you give to the younger generation? Obviously, we have a lot of graduates and kind of college listeners from a networking perspective and listen to the podcast. What piece of advice would you give them kind of to pursue their career in networking?
So I would say that the best piece of advice is to actually just start doing something and networking some devices together. So for me, just having something like GNS3 or what am I using now, EVE-NG, and better just get a few routers together and just join them together and understand IP addressing and how they work, and then how OSPF works, and just these little building blocks, and just to be able to have some devices, and then don't go crazy on it, but just get an appreciation of how these things work and spin up and connect. And then I think now they need to be learning the API side of things and then the automation layer. So understand, go in, get the router, spin it up, configure some commands, and then straight away do that again with an API, do it with Ansible, do it with Python, and figure out how all these things work, because those basic building blocks will then be used. They'll certainly come into play as you go along, because someone will say, oh, can you just write an API to do this for me? And they'll go, well, I did an API, I was doing that last week where I looked into the API for this firewall. Shouldn't be much different to actually change it to this firewall. So
yeah,
so I think it's just, people just say, how do I get started? Well, it's like just start doing stuff, just start playing with things, because there's so much information that, when I started, the information wasn't as readily available. There's so much now. You could literally find everything on YouTube that you wanted, but don't just trust the videos you watch on YouTube, actually dig in and do it yourself. And then circling back to the CCIE, that's the thing, is just doing it. And if you spent an evening watching Netflix, or you spent an evening learning how to configure an API for a Palo Alto firewall or something, by the end of the evening, you know a lot more about that than most of your colleagues will.
Yeah.
So I always remember, I was
invested in yourself, isn't it? Rather than, because it's a very easy trap to fall into. And I go through periods of it where for a couple of weeks, because I'm quite an avid reader, and I'll go through periods of a couple of weeks where, like last week, I felt a little bit under the weather, and I was kind of like, oh, like, do I really want to be reading in the evenings? I might just put Drivel on and watch that. My wife always wants to put Love Island on, but we're not watching that, by the way. Roger, it's not really my cup of tea, but as you would have guessed. But then this week, I started last night, but I started reading again. And it's so easy at that point. And then when she's watching telly, to go, oh, do you want to watch something? Just go, oh no, I'm going to go read instead. But I think you get so much more value. So I think it's better for your soul as well, stuff like that, rather than kind of stuck to the screen, basically just watching Netflix.
Yeah, I've actually started. I've never been a reader, and I picked up a Python book the other day, and just started reading through it. And just a few pages, you just think, oh, and and then you go back to the keyboard and try it, and go, oh right, I understand that now. So yeah, I think don't dismiss reading, because it's there is some value in there, but just doing, just actually doing something and making it work and working out how it works. Read the documentation. And then understand if the documentation doesn't show you, just dig in, and where the value now is, like stuff like Postman, and looking at actually, right, that API isn't documented, because we do a bit of work where, customers will say, right, the API won't do this. We can't make it do this task. So we have to go and dig in, and actually then you dig in with something like Postman, do the core, see what happens, go right into the code, and then write your own API kind of thing, and understand exactly what it's doing. So it's the digging in attitude. That I think a lot of people just want things laid on a plate to them. But if you want to get that job, if you want to go and get the job at Facebook, there's going to be hundreds and hundreds of people all going for the same thing. Who's going to get it is the guy that spent the last 3 months doing coding interview challenges and all these things, and just understanding and investing in it. So yeah, it's not going to be handed to you on a plate.
We live in a generation and in an era where everything's on demand, and basically you can have everything like yesterday, but your food, your date, your TV or whatever. And I worked with a chap many years ago, probably about 15 years ago now, and he was explaining what the difference between somebody who's great and somebody who's good. And he said the people that are great are willing to do the things that good people aren't willing to do. The evenings, the weekends, the early mornings, the late nights. And he was like, every time that you think of that and you apply yourself in that way, he was very much a top performer in his field. He was like, you're going above and beyond. And he was like, if you do things consistently, he was a big on consistency. And he was like, if you do the good things every single day and you're consistent every day, and you don't have an off day, you'll see the rewards. But it's like you said, you've got to put the time in, the 16-hour weekend labs and stuff like that, because that's life,
Yeah, and also doing it efficiently as well. I probably, during that whole process, probably wasted hundreds of hours just procrastinating and not doing it, digging in. I think the biggest thing now with all the stuff going on is actually getting in the zone, because even on my day-to-day work, I'm working at home. I'm lucky enough to have a little office in the bottom of the garden, and I can sit down there. But there are times where a few hours go by and you say, what have I actually done? But I'm big on just putting headphones on and putting some music on, and then you feel yourself go into that zone. And then once you get in the zone, and then literally you make something work, and it comes out the other side, and a couple of hours have gone by, and I've written that code and it's worked. And that's the thing. So I think a lot of, and people are going to find this more and more now, is just getting that focus, which is something I've seen and struggle with. And I know they always say turn off YouTube, turn off Facebook, and do this, but it's just picking the task and zoning into it and focus on it, because there's no such thing as multitasking, and you can only do one thing at once. So just get yourself into that task and do it. But yeah, it's
amazing. Very good. Right, so if you could put yourself in my shoes, that's size 12s, by the way, in case you're wondering. What is the one question you'd ask yourself today that I haven't asked you? Pick a question.
What would I ask me?
What would you ask you?
What would I ask me? So I would say, ask me, would I do anything different again?
Right, let me stop then. Would you do anything different again?
Yeah, I think I could probably have halved if I knew what was happening and I had a crystal ball. So it's one of these things you never lot of people know what they want to do, when they, are in school, when they come out of college. I never knew what I wanted to do. I've sort of drifted into this, I think.
Yeah.
So it's I've sort of followed this path and got to this point. I would have rather been a rock guitarist, but it's but I'm so happy now, and that I can do this job, and I feel sort of very sort of pleased that I can do this, and I'm happy that I can work from home. And a lot of people I know really struggled in the last few years, lost jobs, and taking it for granted. I've always worked at home a lot anyway, but it's, I think, IT and networking and the ability to do this now, I feel very blessed to be in this position. So yeah, I wish I could found a more straighter path, and I would have been further on. I wish I'd got to this point 15 years ago, I think is probably what.
It's the yin and yang of life, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's kind of meander, But if Rod Stewart rung you up and he needed like a guitarist or something for his latest tour, you would do it, basically.
Yeah.
Drop tools, right, I'm off.
Yeah, but it's then that would involve traveling around the world, and I'd be probably going, oh, you know what, I could just do with getting home now.
Yeah, you sound like me. Perfect. Right, you ready for the quick fire round?
Yes.
Perfect. Drum roll. We haven't got a drum roll, so we can't do that. What's something that people find surprising about you?
That I'm a member of the Magic Circle.
Really?
Yeah.
Favorite trick?
My favorite trick is I've been doing it for about 20 years actually. It's something I do now and again at weekends and parties, but I've got a fabulous trick which involves 5 people and 5 snooker balls, and they all get mixed up and people don't know which balls they've chosen, and then I get someone else to put the balls back into the hands of the people that have chosen them, and it's just literally a bag and 5 snooker balls. There's nothing involved, but I finish every show with it, and it gets everyone's afterwards like, how did that even work? So
yeah,
and because I do a lot of sleight of hand, and people just look at my hands and go, yeah, very good, quick fingers, and but yeah, this is the one that I do. That, and most of the tricks you can Google now. You can look on YouTube and find how to do it. You look it up and go, oh, some idiot on YouTube just saying this is how you do this trick. But this one, you'll never find it. So it's it's an interesting thing. Most people don't know that about me, but
very good. What was your favorite subject in school?
It wasn't a subject actually. It's probably PE. I think I wasn't the best student at school, and I actually grew up on a farm and sort of lived outside, and loved the outdoor life, and just couldn't see the point of spending 8 hours a day indoors. And I love PE, which is crazy now when I'm actually spending my life in front of a computer screen. But no, it's I don't think any subjects really grabbed me. It was only when the electronics thing came along that I sort of started to enjoy learning. But yeah, I think I was one of those people that just got through school.
Yeah, you've got to be a rugby fan, surely, with your accent and being outdoorsy and being a farmer.
We like it. Yeah, so it's just anything outside is so I try and find time in the day just to get out and go for a walk. So I prefer to work sort of probably later in the evenings a bit more, so I'll take some time in the day to make sure I do get outside and get some fresh air, and then I like it when it's darker and there's not much going on. So
yeah, pile into it. Apple or Android?
Oh, Apple, definitely. Yeah.
Oh, good work. How many Androids I get on this? It annoys me, as you can see. iPhone.
I've never been that. Oh, but you're locked in. You can't do this. You can't do that. I just want something that just works. And yeah.
Perfect. How much sleep do you get per night?
Well, I try and get. Well, I'll get about 8 hours. But I'm not the earliest person to bed, so I probably will. Normally stay up till about 1ish, I would say, and then get about 8:30. I'll get up. So. Yeah, so I'm not an early bird. I do prefer later in the day. I've never been one of these up at 5 o'clock and get this stuff done. So
I'm in my pajamas and tucked up by 10.
All right,
throwing me off a little bit now. Nerdiest piece of tech that you own?
The nerdiest piece of tech is it's a little box that simulates a Vox AC30 amplifier. Because one of my little projects over lockdown was I built a replica of Brian May's Red Special guitar.
Very good.
Which was something I had been wanting to do for a while and never had the time. So I've never been at home and had enough time to do that. So that sort of kicked off, and then I need something to plug it into. So you can either go and buy a massive great Vox amp, which is big and loud, but I've got this little box which I've just recently bought, which just simulates that analog Vox amplifier sound, and it just plugs straight into a pair of speakers, and it sounds phenomenal. But
wow, slick! I like it. Super. Well, it's been a pleasure, Roger. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us. Where can people find you? Not literally, but I mean, in the social realms.
Yeah, so rogerperkin.co.uk is my website. So I've had that website now for many years. It started off as a CCIE blog. So I originally built it for that, and I was documenting my CCIE journey. And then more recently, I've written a lot on there about Ansible and Python and automation. So I think a lot of people actually contact me and say, "Oh, we were just Googling something on how to do this and found your website." So I've got an interest in SEO, and so I sort of write things on there and make sure it ranks on the search engine. So yeah, rogerperkin.co.uk. There's a lot of free information. I've also authored a couple courses on there. So there's an Ansible course. Started with a Nornia course, and then I'm actually in the process of looking at a Git course for network engineers. So they all go into a little small bundle of everything. So that's pretty good. That helps me learn. So that's my sort of way of learning now, is to either put a video on it, do a YouTube video, or do a course. So yeah, rogerperkin.co.uk. I'm on Twitter at Roger N Perkin. So, and also I do have a YouTube channel as well, which I think is, if you just search Roger Perkin YouTube, I'll come up there, and I've got a lot of free stuff on there as well.
On it, are you? You doing magic tricks on there as well, or not? You keep that.
No, you'll have to Google Roger the Magician and see what you find. Yeah, I do appear under a different name for that. Yeah, but literally my name, if you Google Roger Perkin, a lot of it comes up. LinkedIn will come up, and but the website comes up. And yeah, I think if you Google CCIE validity checker, I'm #1 for that search. So I'm quite proud of some of the searches that I sort of beat Cisco on for some things. But yeah, but just search my name. You'll find me. Feel free to follow me on the YouTube channel. It'd be great to get some more subscribers on there. I do try and put videos up, as much as I can on what I'm doing. And then drop me a mail. That's all on the website. Be happy to speak to anybody. But
amazing. Well, thank you, Roger. It's been a pleasure. This was the Route to Networking podcast, brought to you by Hamilton Barnes, and thanks for listening today.
Great. Thank you, George.
That was really good, mate. Really, really good.